In a world torn apart by war and fear, a young girl heard the voice of God. Her name was Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc, a humble peasant from a forgotten village, who would one day shake the throne of France, and stand fearless before the powers of the earth. She was not born into nobility. She could not read or write. Yet through faith alone, she led armies, defied kings, and faced death with the serenity of a saint. This is her story. The year was 1412. France was bleeding. For nearly a century, the kingdom had been ravaged by the 100 Years' War, a brutal conflict between France and England for control of the French crown. In the tiny village of Domrémy, in northeastern France, a child was born to poor farmers, Jacques and Isabelle d'Arc. Her name was Jeanne. She grew up tending sheep, spinning wool, and praying in the small village church. Life was simple and hard. English raids were frequent. Villages burned. But in this world of fear and ruin, Joan found strength in her faith. She prayed constantly, spoke softly, and showed compassion to all. Then, one spring afternoon, as she stood in her father's garden, she heard a voice. It was the voice of Saint Michael the Archangel. The voice told her that God had chosen her for a mission, one that would seem impossible. At first, Joan trembled with fear. She doubted herself. But the voices came again, clearer and stronger. They were joined by Saint Catherine of Alexandria and Saint Margaret, two holy martyrs. Together, they told her, "Go to the Dauphin, Charles, and help him reclaim his kingdom. God will be with you." Charles, the rightful heir to the French throne, lived in exile, mocked as the king of Bourges, powerless and unsure. Joan, a peasant girl, could not even dream of approaching a prince. Yet faith burned within her heart. She waited 4 years, praying and preparing. The voices grew insistent. "Go now. The time has come." At 17, Joan left her home, without her parents' blessing, and set out for the town of Vaucouleurs, where a local commander, Robert de Baudricourt, guarded the frontier. She told him boldly, "I must go to the Dauphin. My lord will give him the victory." He laughed. A girl leading armies. It was absurd. But Joan did not retreat. Her faith and courage touched the soldiers around her. Soon, whispers spread. A maiden sent by God has come to save France. At last, she was given a small escort, 6 men to accompany her. Wearing men's clothing for protection, she rode for 11 days through forests, rivers, and enemy lands to reach Chinon, where Charles awaited. When she arrived, the court was full of suspicion. Many believed she was a fraud, or worse, a witch. To test her, Charles hid among his nobles, disguised as an ordinary man. Joan entered the crowded hall, looked around once, and walked straight toward him. She knelt and said, "Most noble Dauphin, I am sent by God to bring you his kingdom." The hall fell silent. Charles was astonished. No one had told her which man was the king. From that day forward, he believed she was guided by heaven. Joan was examined by priests and scholars in the city of Poitiers. They found her answers pure, her faith unshakable. Soon after, Charles gave her a white suit of armor, a sword, and a banner, white silk embroidered with the names Jesus and Mary. She carried no weapon to kill. Her sword was for protection, her banner for hope. Joan rode ahead of the army, her banner fluttering like a flame of faith. Hardened soldiers who had long lost their courage began to believe again. Her very presence was a prayer. In April 1429, Joan arrived at Orleans, a city surrounded by English forces. The French army was exhausted, hopeless. But Joan lifted their spirits. She prayed with them, tended to the wounded, and promised, "Before mid-May, the city will be free." She led charge after charge, her banner held high. An arrow pierced her shoulder, yet she refused to retreat. After being treated, she returned to the front, shouting, "In God's name, we shall win." And they did. On May 8, 1429, the English fled Orleans. It was a miracle, not just a military triumph, but the rebirth of a nation's soul. Victory followed victory. One by one, towns surrendered to Joan's army. At last, in July 1429, they entered Reims, where kings of France were crowned. Inside the great cathedral, the Dauphin knelt before the altar, and was anointed King Charles VII of France. Joan stood beside him in shining armor, tears streaming down her face. Her mission, she believed, was complete. The voices had promised this, and God had kept his word. But glory was fleeting. The next year, while defending the town of Compiègne, Joan was captured by Burgundian soldiers, allies of the English. She was sold for 10,000 francs and taken to Rouen, a city under English control. There, she was thrown into a dark cell, chained, cold, and constantly watched. Her enemies feared her. They wanted her silenced. A sham trial was arranged, led by biased churchmen under English pressure. They accused her of heresy, witchcraft, and pride. Joan, barely 19, faced a hall full of scholars determined to break her spirit. Yet she answered with wisdom and grace. "The voices come from God," she said. "They have guided me. If they were to tell me something contrary to the faith, I would not believe them. But I know they are from heaven." Even her judges were moved by her purity. But they condemned her anyway. On the morning of May 30, 1431, Joan of Arc was led to the marketplace of Rouen. She wore a simple white robe. A wooden cross hung around her neck. The executioner bound her to a tall stake. As the flames rose, she cried out, "Jesus! Jesus! Jesus!" Her voice echoed through the square until it was silenced by the fire. A soldier standing nearby whispered, "We have burned a saint." Joan was 19 years old. 25 years later, the church overturned her sentence, declaring her innocent. And in 1920, Pope Benedict XV canonized her as Saint Joan of Arc, patroness of France, of soldiers, and of those who are persecuted for truth. She was a shepherd girl. She became a warrior. She died a martyr. But her spirit lives on, wherever courage meets faith, and truth stands unafraid before the flames.